Welcome to episode 3 of Catalysis. This month, I chatted with members at our Postgraduate and Early Career Researcher Symposium and heard from our esteemed panel of Dr. Prunella Blinman, Associate Professor Chris Milross, and Professors Phyllis Buteau and Lisa Horvath. The results? An honest, at times poignant, and at times funny look at life as a career scientist and clinician. We hope you enjoy this episode featuring the many voices of Sydney Catalyst.
So today we're going to talk about translational cancer research, which in a nutshell I think is really, in my view, how to make cancer research relevant. Because cancer research is fantastic, basic science is really good, I do a lot of it personally, but what we all really want to do is get to the stage that this research actually changes clinical practice, and today we're going to talk a bit. And the first one is, how did you come to be involved in translational cancer research? Shoot, Phyllis.
So I guess for the last 20 years I've been doing randomised controlled trials of interventions to improve outcomes for cancer patients. We've developed decision aids and question prompts and psychological interventions because I'm a psychologist. And I was a bit sick of finishing the randomised controlled trial, publishing the results showing efficacy and then nothing ever happening. So I really became quite interested in how to get this into clinical practice. And I guess the key change came for me was when we developed some guidelines on a clinical pathway for managing anxiety and depression in cancer patients. And we really wanted to get that into clinical practice. And it became a driving force to actually see something get past the RCT and actually make a difference.
Hi, I'm Prunella. I'm an oncologist at Concord. So essentially I'm a full-time oncologist, which means that as part of that role, I do research. I became involved in translational cancer research. It's part of the pathway of what we do. Part of it was to get a job, and part of it was because I actually do like it. And so once I finished my advanced training, I embarked on a PhD with Martin Stockley here at the NHMRC Clinical Trials Centre. Had a lot of interaction with Phyllis along the way, and so I fairly quickly decided that I didn't want to do lab research, and so I did a PhD in patient-reported outcomes specifically, so that my research interest from there has evolved sort of almost organically along the way. Predominantly now I do clinical research, taken a little bit of time. The sort of hard bit for me was finishing the PhD and sort of establishing myself as my own researcher, doing things that I like to do. So I've been involved in lots of catalyst things, specifically funding PhD students. That's probably how I mostly get research done at the moment.
I actually did want to be a laboratory researcher, and when I finished my training, spent 3 years full-time, and it has been and continues to be a period of my life which I reflect on as being some of the most fun I have had at any time. Alas, as a clinician, it hasn't ultimately proved compatible with a full-time clinical load running a lab. So my own translational research career has actually morphed from collaborating with folks, doing hardcore basic cancer research through into participating as a clinician in clinical trials that are testing some of those hypotheses, and my own interest was always in combined modality cancer treatments with respect to the biology of what was going on with those various combinations, and in more recent years into day-to-day issues around practical patient care, as Phyllis was talking about with patient decision-making, and also with respect to patient literacy, a critically important area. So my recommendation would be that you allow yourselves to collaborate, but also understand that your careers will change over the passage of the next 20 years, and what you start out doing won't necessarily be what you finish up. And it's all interesting in medicine and science.
I think I kind of round out the experience we're talking about because I'm a medical oncologist who did a PhD like Chris in the lab in molecular biology, and for the last 15 years I've run a molecular biology lab as well as being a full-time medical oncologist. And I think it's good to see that there's a gradation of what you can do. And tomorrow's my lab day. I'll be in the lab. I'll be talking about cell culture and I'll be looking at results. And I think one of the things that you see from the discussions on the panel is that there are many ways to do this. The biggest thing I think I've learnt in this process is, because I was told this was impossible, and I think many of us are often told that, is that nothing's impossible, it's just a question of how we want to do it. And if you put yourself in the box and don't think outside the box, in the box you will remain.
When do I get to improvise in my work? Daily. I would say constantly. So basically the type of work that we are doing is kind of pioneer in the field. And we work with in vivo, with single cell analysis of patient-derived samples. And we never know what we are going to expect. Basically, every sample is different. We have to be constantly on the moment, just deciding what to do, like a 5 minutes 10. So it's something that I think is constant in research. You need to adapt. Yeah. I think adaptation is the key to success, maybe, hopefully.
Excellent. Well, on that note, I'm going to skew the discussion now because we all talk about all the things we have achieved. Let's talk about what do you think's been your biggest flop in translational research and what did you learn from it?
Well, I might start off. I mean, I think there are lots of things there are lots of RCTs I've done of interventions which are not in clinical practice. And I think it's because we didn't go to the clinicians and patients before we designed the intervention to really find out what will be practical and what will be welcome and what will be the barriers to that uptake before we actually designed the intervention. So we evaluated something that was never going to work in the long run. And it just really underlined to me the importance of talking to people and asking the right questions before you start to make sure that what you are evaluating and spend lots of money on doing that will have some potential for being in use.
Thanks, Phyllis. I just want to pick up on that one. And Lisa, I won't necessarily directly answer your question, but what Phyllis has just given is a wonderful chestnut regarding a successful approach to a whole lot of different areas in your career. And the question is basically, what do you need? And in reciprocal, what do I need? So if I've had any success at all, it's been through collaboration, and those conversations amongst collaborators are critical. You can't assume that you know what will fix someone else's problem. You have to ask what they need, and that will get successful research done and published every time.
Can we afford risking things nowadays? And also, in order to get funding, you have to have a wonderful idea, but also kind of proof already that you are able to get it to the end.
It's threading the needle, and you're describing the problem of many lab heads as well as PhD and postdocs. Who would like to be the first one to try and thread the needle? Okay, given that the panellists are staring at their shoes, I'll start and then see if anybody criticises me. I think part of it is having a balance in your portfolio of work. You've got to have, you're right, you don't publish anything for 3 years, you're toast. You like to balance the portfolio against, there's always going to be some stuff that you'll know you'll be able to publish, whether it's positive or negative. And that's kind of like your bedrock to allow you to do the stuff that you got no idea and you're going to go out on a limb on. And Sydney Catalyst does a lot of that in the seed funding, because the seed funding is about pushing the envelope to give people a little bit of money to take some wacko idea that they're not sure if it'll happen and see if it does and seed it into the next funding round. So it's all about balancing, and it is very tricky. I mean, I every year get my NH and MRC reviews, and the idea that somebody thought was highly innovative last year and just missed out on funding, everyone goes, oh, it's not very interesting. Got to get that balance in order to move your career forward.
I mean, the risk is interesting because sometimes the risky thing is the most innovative thing that you can argue is completely new and novel. And there are granting schemes, of course, that target innovative, new, blue sky ideas. So you can look around to find funding that matches that sort of idea. So I think I agree with you, Lisa, I think it is a matter of having a number of irons in the fire that you might be looking at, but I think risky ideas can be good ones.
I'm a bit risk averse. So as far as big risks are concerned, I think one of the best pieces of early career advice I ever got was from Mr. Peters, who's a radiation oncologist now in Melbourne. And when I was embarking on my laboratory research career, Lester's advice was play to your strengths. You've got 3 years to do this. Don't learn an entire new science. You know some tumour biology, stick with that. So that said, I don't know if it sort of relates to risk, but it's really about staying curious, and continuing to ask questions and asking questions from as diverse or broad range of corners as you can come at. So curious, yes. Big risks, I'm not 100% sure about, but stay curious.
Hi there, my name's Brooke Nicol, and I am a PhD candidate with the School of Public Health at the University of Sydney, and I work with the Wiser Healthcare Research Collaboration there in the school.
So, Brooke, what is the best piece of career advice you've ever received?
I'd probably have to say the best piece of career advice I've ever received is to just really do something that you love and that makes you want to get up every morning and motivates you to go to work, as that will, be the way for you to always continue to enjoy what you do and stay focused on the task at hand. So I guess moving forward, after I finish my PhD, I'll try and continue to take that on board and follow, a career path in research that I do love.
And Megan?
Apply for everything. So when you see that there is a grant application that you have the most remote connection to, that it's worth cutting and pasting what you've already done and applying again. And I think that's worked out really well for me.
How do you forge those collaborations? If you're a newbie student or postdoc, how do you walk in there and make somebody with 20 years experience stand up and pay attention and say, yes, I want to work with
I'm a collaborator, because otherwise I wouldn't get anything done. I don't have time. So I collaborate multiple levels. So, and in particular in research, that would be being part of cancer research groups. But even like at a smaller level, I've submitted my PhD in like 2011 or 12. So I'm much earlier on than these guys around me. But it's taken a while to kind of develop, because I've moved away from where I did my PhD. I'm set up as a clinical oncologist at Concord, and it's just taken a little while to get the research momentum going again. But the way I've sort of mostly got it going is primarily through supervising. That's what I like to do. But realising and accepting that I don't actually have the time to do it myself, okay? And it's one way I've done it. And the second way, collaborating even at Concord, and as part of Catalyst in particular, obtaining Catalyst funding by actually collaborating with other Catalyst members who have complementary skills to me, and we each bring something to the table. And so putting all our heads together, we've come up with some good ideas that have been funded, and we've actually gone ahead and done the project successfully, whether we got the intended results or not. But I totally am for it. It's totally the way that you should be doing it. It mitigates risk, as what they were talking to before. And it's quite fun, and you learn from other people. And that's what's so good about it. That's the good bit of research.
And I think there's lots of ways to start collaborations. I mean, I've had postdocs who have really done this very successfully by going to an international conference, going to a session, hearing something that they're interested in, or meeting someone who's working in a similar area, and then bowling up to them and saying, I'm really interested in doing X or Y. Would you like to join me? We're two early career researchers. Let's work together. They might start a systematic review, which they can do from distance, with each other. So I think that's one way of doing it. The other thing, as Prunella said, is it's a win-win situation for senior people as well as for junior people, because they can get involved in lots of things that they can't possibly do on their own, particularly if you offer to do some work to actually move something forward. Other people will be interested in working with you because they can see something getting done that they couldn't do otherwise. So when we do systematic reviews, I always try and find an international expert to invite. And even if you've never met them before, if you write to them and say, we're working on this, we'd love to have your input, people are complimented. As long as you don't give them too much work to do, they're often very happy to get their name on another publication. You get their nous and, expertise, and it's a win-win situation. So be bold, be brave, be upfront, and I reckon you can get people engaged.
Thanks for the tip, Phyllis.
I'm going to do it. And just remember internationally that, and this was a bit of advice given to me by a very senior academic, worked overseas, who said, everybody thinks Australians are just a little bit nuts. And if you think about that, well, they think we're a little bit eccentric, we've got a bit of a quirky sense of humour. And if you think about that when you go up to speak to somebody who's senior and you revere, you think, what have I got to lose? If they think it's not what they want to do, they just think I'm a quirky Australian. The chances are, if they want to do it, they'll go for it. And if they don't want to do it, they'll forget your name the moment they walk away. So you've got nothing to lose.
Did you have a mentor, an important mentor during your early career, and what do you think makes a good mentor?
I had a great mentor who was a woman called Professor Jill Coburn. She was not my immediate supervisor. She wasn't even really a formal mentor, actually, but she was someone that I interacted with. And the thing about her was that she was always interested and constructive in her feedback and wanting to help. So it was never just critical, it was always constructive. And I got really inspired by that, and I really built my way of working with students by observing her and liking what she did. So it was by modelling as much as anything else.
From a research perspective, personally, I would still consider my supervisor as an ongoing research mentor, solely because he's so good. He's available, he makes himself available, he's invariably usually right. But he'll kind of stop and take the time if I've got questions for him, and he knows if I've got a question, it's a real question, and I don't hesitate at all to ask him, like, what could be the dumbest question around. I still do. So, I think mentors are meant to be people whom you might consider not in a formal role. They're meant to be inspiring, they're meant to help you, provide advice, provide direction, someone you look up to, someone that, you hope to emulate in some ways.
My own career, not one, but numerous mentors during different stages, and I think the operative word that you used was inspirational. If I reflect on my own experience with folks that were influencing me at different stages, they were inspirational. They were practicing medicine or learning science in a way that I thought was very cool and that I wanted to be more like. And if it turns out that you can ask that person a question and they give you some time, even and a brief reply, I think that's kind of the essence of the mentoring process.
Hi, my name's Amelia Smith. I am a PhD candidate in the Cancer Epidemiology and Prevention Research Team, and I'm also affiliated with Sydney Health Ethics and the Melanoma Institute at the University of Sydney.
What do you think makes a good team?
I think a good team is dependent on a good leader, someone who has really good communication skills, is highly organised, really maintains enthusiasm among the team members, and makes it a pleasant environment to be a part of.
Can I extend the panel on this? Because I know all of you have exceedingly busy lives covering those different balls, and all of you have kids. What do you think are the key things that's made that balance between research, family life, and for Prunella and Chris, clinical work? Or not at some times.
Great say have a laugh.
I seriously don't know about balance. I think that the notion that you can find balance, I don't understand. I sort of wish I did, but I don't. I mean, I think you all are already, you're here. You're all outstanding folks with the world at your feet, basically. You're here because you can do multiple things all at the same time. You're here because you can handle pressure. You've kind of always been like that, and you always will. You just have to forgive yourself periodically when, you fall in a heap and realise that you can't go 24/7 and you do need to rest every now and then. I remember when I was doing my own MD, if I had an experiment running that went through the weekend, which often happened, I don't know what it does for students, but it just does, and then I would get to about Wednesday of the week after and fall in a heap, and I'd go home and I'd say, I'm smashed, I can't do another thing. And my better half would invariably say, most people have a day or two off every now and then. You know, it's okay, you're allowed to. It's actually really important.
I think it is really hard because to make it in research, you do have to have the 16 publications and you do have to produce. So it is a lifelong battle to work out the balance. And I think it fluxes and wanes, and you've got to recognise that there will be periods when you've got very little children that you're just not going to be as productive as you are at other times, and then they get older and you can be more productive. But I can remember, a baby in a pram pushing the pram with one hand while writing the grant with the other, trying to get them both done. But my boys are now 27 and 25. They've survived, and they say to me now that they can't imagine having had a mother who was not working. It's just normal for them. They don't seem to have completely become neurotic. So we all survived somehow.
I'm a bit more, I feel like I'm just out of the trenches, but I'm a bit more in the midst with my 7-year-old and 5-year-old. So I managed to do my whole PhD without children, which for me was a boon because it meant I could travel, it meant I went to lots of conferences, I got lots of grant monies to do so, and so that was a major advantage of my actual PhD. But then once I started working and had tiny babies at home, well, that was hard work. And I think when I've referred to the lull between finishing my PhD and just recently ramping it up again, I think part and parcel that was because I had 2 babies at home. I'm just accepting that actually I can't do everything here and it will all get better. I just need to work out a way. Everyone does it differently. It's hard work. Like, you just have to accept that. You just can't do everything. My productivity is not going to be as good as other people. I've just got to be comfortable that the choices that I make are the right ones and try and be productive as I can. And with regards to the mentoring, it is difficult because once you do have kids, you are sort of strapped down and, locked down, and it is hard unless you thrive on 4 hours of sleep a night, which I don't. Unfortunately, you still have to achieve to get somewhere. So you just can't do enough because the next person down the road is going to have done more than you. And I think in medical oncology in particular, I find that balance is actually really hard because the jobs are scarce and the competition is really high.
I'm going to add to that you should outsource. I can tell you from personal experience, my kids do not know whether I clean the house or wash their underpants.
Nannies are good, cleaners are good, grandparents are good, husbands sometimes good. Once I sort of accepted, you know what, it doesn't need to be me to be watching the book club parade at school. It can be my husband, it can be the nanny, it can be either one of the grandparents, it can be parents of other friends, school mums who take the photo for you. Like, truly, once you kind of let go of that a little bit and realise you can't do everything, but nor do I want to do everything, the load is a little bit easier to bear.
What is the one piece of career advice that has served you the best?
I've got 2 pieces. The first one is collaborate, so we've already talked about that. And the second one I think is to say yes until you're overwhelmed. You can the more you take on and the more hats you throw in the ring and go and sit on committees in societies and organisations and go on grants and generally be positive and say yes, because it'll all build up into a portfolio that will get you places. So I found it useful on the whole to try and say yes before I think about saying no. The reason I say yes is that you just never know what's going to walk through your door that's going to lead to a whole new thing. 12 years ago or something, Kathy Tucker, who's a geneticist, walked through my door and said, we've just discovered BRCA1 and BRCA2 and we really need to know how people are going to react to this psychologically, and that led into decades of research, which if I hadn't sat down and listened to her and said yes, I would never have got involved in. And, people walk through the door and bring up ideas that I've never thought of before. And some of them will be dead ends, but some of them will build into fantastic collaborations and great work. So that's why I say yes.
Couldn't tell you specifically who said it, but it's probably best explained by Stephen Bergman, who's otherwise known as Samuel Shem, who wrote The House of God. And Bergman says that in your career in medicine and science, isolation is death. And so his advice is stay connected. Look for those opportunities, and that's why the yes response is most often the right one, because yes creates a connection. Those connections allow you to continue to learn about what you're doing, and maybe even to make the field that you're working in better, or to make humans' lives better as a result of what you discover. And that's actually an opportunity that not a lot of people in this world are given, and it comes about through those connections. So at various points it will become overwhelming and you have to kind of stand up and shake a few things off. I've purged when you discover that you're 10 kilos heavier than you need to be and your blood pressure's up and you're not looking after yourself properly, then that's time to take stock.
So how I remind myself of the meaning behind my work is actually quite easy, because part of my work is talking with cancer patients and understanding how they're experiencing the genomic testing that they're undertaking. And so for me, it's really about remembering that personal story, and that resonates really nicely with me and really just makes me realise how important the work that we do is.
If you're a clinician, it helps, because you can always go down the clinical path for a while and just give the research a break. And then you might find that clinically you get inspired by a problem that you've got that you want to solve that brings you back to science. You know, whether you want to go and be a dance teacher or a pastry cook or something completely different. Don't they say now that everybody's going to have 7 careers in their lives? There is often a sort of a sidestep that you can take. You don't have to leap across to dance teaching, but you can often take a little sidestep that takes you into something else that might still links and uses your previous learning, but gives you a break from that and takes you into a different direction.
Certainly in basic science, I've seen people go in all sorts of interesting directions who've decided to step away, I would say, from academic science. I've had one colleague who went off and did a Masters of Public Health and became after being a group leader, running her own group, and she works in cancer advocacy in the third world, something completely different. I've seen people move into scientific management, grant management, go and work for the NHMRC, go and work for the university administrative, people who've gone into industry and worked as scientists in drug companies, in biotech companies. And the other thing that people can do, because a lot of it's generally about, am I going to be a group leader? Am I going to run my own independent lab? Is that what I want to do if you're a straight scientist? And another way of doing it is, I must say, is work for a clinician scientist. I have a postdoc who's worked for me for 7 years, and she doesn't want to be a group leader. She's a stunning scientist. She is not interested in being a group leader, but I am not in the lab often enough to change postdocs every 3 years. So she's developed her own niche, and I have seen this in numerous clinician scientists' labs, where she's developed a niche of how to work with a busy clinician scientist who doesn't have enough time and get her own stuff done, as well as doing the work that I want to do, and not have to write grants. If you look around the average research institute, you will be surprised at the variety of what a PhD has gotten you. People who go into medical publishing, into medical publishing art as a niche. There's a whole variety, but the problem is a lot of us, when we're in the middle of our PhDs, are only ever taught that if you don't make it in academic science, you must have failed. And that's absolutely not true. It's like anything else, it's a stepping stone to whatever interests you next.
There's so many options, and there's no right one. And if that you want to be the group lead scientist, lead in the lab, then go for it. But if you don't want to do that, okay, fine. Just find something else find it is that you really want to do and go for that, and think your whole life and never wanted to be a lead scientist anyway. It's not like that's the second best option just because when you're doing your PhD it seemed like the only option. It's about doing what's right for you, truly.
I suppose my thoughts stem from thinking about the fact that one of the things that I've enjoyed most through those opportunities to collaborate in research and to learn is that learning brings meaning and fulfillment. In other words, happiness comes for me from that process of discovery, whatever the topic is. I think there will be times when, and in fact I think it's healthy to question what you're doing, whether it's the right thing for you, whether it's what you need to be doing for the next 10 years. And really what you're doing is reflecting on whether what's happening at that moment is bringing meaning and fulfillment to your life. I think someone else suggested that you need to allow yourself to make changes, and those changes will come out of reflection that says, this is not working for me anymore, I'm going to go in that different direction. And I think it's okay. We're lucky in that regard. I don't think that time spent in your stage of the research career is ever wasted, no matter what you ultimately end up doing, because it's teaching you how to learn, and then you can apply those same skills to almost anything.
Then I feel it's not appropriate. I don't know. There's always work hard, play hard, like take time for yourself, but I don't know if that's...
No, that's good.
That's good.
That's good.
Yeah, work hard, but also, you know, you've got to have fun and you've got to enjoy yourself, and sometimes that can...
Start taking.
Okay.
I am.
Oh, you
Yeah.
Sneaky. No, but then, yeah, sometimes you can... But then sometimes that kind of crosses over, that when you work hard, you know, you form really good relationships with people you work with, and then suddenly your work becomes your play hard as well, which I think is nice. And I think I've found, well, I've only just started recently, but I found a lab where I think I can work hard and play hard in, and it's fun.
Throughout the year, we will be discussing important issues in the cancer space, from the controversial to the common sense. Do you have a topic that you would like to discuss on a future podcast? Get in touch. We would love to chat with you. You can email us at sydneycatalyst@ctc.ucit.edu.au. Catalysis is produced by Sydney Catalyst. The music is composed by Ling Zishu and distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial and Non-Derivative